The call to the Beverly Hills Police Department didn't come immediately. That is the first thing you need to understand. When a man is stabbed in the chest with a 10-inch butcher knife, when the blood begins to soak into the thick, expensive pile of a pink carpet, panic usually dictates an instant scream for help. But on the night of April 4th, 1958, at 730 North Bedford Drive, there was a pause. A heavy, suffocating 45-minute pause between the death of Johnny Stompanato and the arrival of the law. In that missing hour, the most glamorous bedroom in Hollywood transformed from a crime scene into a stage set, meticulously arranged by unseen hands. When Chief Clinton Anderson finally walked through those doors, he didn't just find a dead gangster and a sobbing movie star. He walked into a carefully crafted illusion that would haunt Hollywood history for decades. The body was there, yes. The weeping 14-year-old girl was there, claiming responsibility. But something was wrong. The air was too still, the narrative too perfect, and the timeline simply did not add up. What happened in those 45 minutes? Who entered that house while Stompanato's body was still warm? And more importantly, what did they take with them when they left? To truly grasp the weight of that silence, we must first peel back the layers of the woman standing at the center of the storm. Lana Turner wasn't just an actress. She was a construct, a deity forged in the golden fires of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer dream factory. She was the sweater girl, the platinum blonde fantasy of a post-war America desperate for escapism. On the silver screen, she played the femme fatale, the suffering beauty, the woman who could make men kill with a single glance. But the irony, sharp and cruel, was that Lana's real life was far more chaotic and violent than any script she had ever been handed. She was a woman who collected husbands like trinkets, searching for a stability she had never known, only to find herself repeatedly drawn to the darkness. And no darkness was deeper, no shadow more consuming, than the one cast by the man now lying dead on her floor. Johnny Stompanato wasn't a movie star. He wasn't a producer. He was a handsome, brutal enforcer for Mickey Cohen, the king of the Los Angeles underworld. He was a man who spoke the language of broken bones and shallow graves, a predator who had smelled the vulnerability on Lana like blood in the water. Their meeting had been electric, a collision of two volatile worlds that should never have touched. Lana, bored with the plastic men of Hollywood, found something intoxicating in Johnny's raw, unpolished danger. He was visceral. He was real. At first, he played the part of the perfect gentleman, sending her flowers, lighting her cigarettes, making her feel like the only woman in the world. But the mask of the gentleman is heavy, and Johnny Stompanato didn't have the patience to wear it for long. As weeks turned into months, the fairy tale curdled into a nightmare of possessiveness and paranoia. Johnny didn't just want to love Lana Turner. He wanted to own her. He wanted to possess the icon, to break her down until she was nothing more than an extension of his own ego. The abuse started slowly, a grab on the arm, a voice raised too loud in a crowded restaurant, but it escalated with terrifying speed into a campaign of psychological and physical terror that turned Lana's Beverly Hills mansion into a gilded prison. The walls of that mansion, if they could speak, would scream. They witnessed the nights when Johnny held a gun to Lana's head, whispering detailed descriptions of how he would destroy her face, how he would carve up that million-dollar asset so that no camera would ever love her again. He knew her deepest fear was not death, but irrelevance, the loss of the beauty that was her currency. He preyed on it. He stalked her to film sets, famously flying to London to threaten Sean Connery with a revolver, only to be disarmed and humiliated, a slight that festered in his gut like poison. By the spring of 1958, the tension in the Turner household was palpable, a physical weight pressing down on everyone who lived there. And watching it all from the shadows, silent and terrified, was Cheryl Crane, Lana's teenage daughter. A girl caught in the crossfire of a war she didn't understand, watching her mother wither under the thumb of a monster. Cheryl had seen the bruises Lana tried to hide with heavy makeup. She had heard the muffled cries through the bedroom walls. She was the invisible witness, the ticking bomb that Johnny Stompanato never bothered to defuse because he never considered her a threat. He saw a child. He should have seen a protector. The night of the Oscars in late March had been the breaking point, though neither of them knew it yet. Lana had refused to take Johnny as her date, terrified that his presence would tarnish her image on Hollywood's biggest night. Johnny's rage that evening had been apocalyptic. He had beaten her severely, leaving bruises that required hours of professional makeup to conceal the next morning. It was a declaration of war. He was telling her that she belonged to him, that her fame, her awards, her public adoration meant nothing compared to his control. But Lana Turner, beneath the silk and the fragility, possessed a core of steel that Johnny had underestimated. She began to plot her escape, to find the courage to kick him out. Yet breaking up with a man like Stompanato wasn't as simple as changing the locks. He held leverage. He claimed to have compromising photos, letters, recordings, the kind of nuclear material that could end a career in 1958 instantly. So, when April 4th arrived, the air in the house was thick with the static of an approaching storm. It was Good Friday, but there would be no mercy in the Turner household that night. The afternoon had begun deceptively calm. Johnny had arrived at the house and the drinking had started early. By the evening, the veneer of civility had shattered completely. The argument began in the bedroom, that sacred space of pinks and whites that Lana had designed as her sanctuary. But there was no sanctuary now. Johnny's voice was booming, shaking the frames on the walls. He wasn't just threatening Lana anymore. He was threatening to destroy everything she loved. "I'll cut you," he screamed. "I'll get your mother and your daughter too." It was this specific threat, this expansion of his violence to include the innocent, that changed the chemistry of the room. Down the hall, Cheryl was packing her bag, trying to disappear, trying to drown out the noise with the television. But the screams were too loud. They pierced through the door, through her defenses, triggering a primal instinct that bypassed logic and fear. She went to the kitchen. She didn't look for a weapon. She looked for a solution. Her hand closed around the cold handle of a carving knife. It wasn't a conscious plan. It was a trance. And as she walked up the stairs, the knife hidden against her skirt, the clock was ticking down to the moment that would shatter their lives. But let's pause here. Let's go back to that body on the floor. When the knife went in, the violence was shockingly abrupt. But what happened after the thud of the body hitting the floor is where the true mystery lies. Why did Lana Turner, a woman who had the personal number of every powerful man in Los Angeles, not call the police immediately? Why was the first call made to her mother? And why was the second call made to Jerry Giesler, the legendary Hollywood fixer, the lawyer known for burying the sins of the stars? Giesler arrived at the house before the police. A doctor arrived before the police. For 45 minutes, while Johnny Stompanato lay cooling on the rug, a flurry of activity took place in that house that was never fully explained in court. Were they simply comforting a hysterical child? Or were they rearranging the stage props for the performance of a lifetime? Was the knife wiped? Were letters burned? Was the body moved? The timeline suggests a gap so wide you could drive a hearse through it. And it is in this gap, in this dark, silent interval before the sirens wailed, that the ghost of the truth might still be hiding. When the police finally stepped into the foyer of the Bedford Drive mansion, the atmosphere wasn't frantic. It was eerie. Chief Clinton Anderson later remarked that it felt less like a crime scene and more like a wake that had already ended. Lana Turner was there, her face a mask of tragic beauty, composed yet trembling just enough to be convincing. Beside her stood Cheryl, the 14-year-old girl who had supposedly just committed a brutal homicide. But Cheryl wasn't hysterical. She wasn't covered in blood. She stood with a strange, detached calmness and delivered the line that would become the headline of every newspaper in America the next morning. "I did it. I killed him. I had to protect my mother." It was a confession so immediate, so uncluttered by confusion, that it instantly raised the hackles of the seasoned detectives. Usually, murder is messy. People deny, they scream, they panic. They don't hand over a confession wrapped in a bow within seconds of the law arriving. The body of Johnny Stompanato lay in the bedroom, but something about the scene defied the physics of violence. There was blood, yes, but not the chaotic spray one expects from a fatal stabbing. The room was orderly, too orderly. It was as if the chaos had been scrubbed away, leaving only the tragic tableau the residents wanted the world to see. The knife, that 10-inch blade of high-carbon steel, had pierced Johnny's abdomen with surgical precision, severing the aorta. But where were the signs of the struggle? Where were the overturned lamps, the shattered vases that usually accompany a life-or-death fight between a gangster and a Hollywood star? The detectives began to wonder if they were looking at the aftermath of a murder or the final scene of a meticulously directed play. And that 45-minute gap, the time between the stabbing and the call to the police, hung in the air like a thick fog, obscuring the truth of what had been removed from that room before the sirens wailed. While the police were processing the scene, another drama was unfolding across town. The phone rang in the headquarters of Mickey Cohen, the mob boss who had originally loaned Johnny to Lana. When Cohen heard the news that his enforcer was dead, killed by a teenage girl with a kitchen knife, he didn't buy it for a second. To Cohen, this was a hit, a Hollywood cover-up. He knew Johnny. He knew Johnny was a street fighter who could disarm a man with a gun. The idea that a terrified child could walk up to him and plunge a knife deep enough to hit his spine without Johnny blocking it seemed laughable to the mobster. Cohen immediately went on the offensive. If Lana Turner was going to play the grieving victim, he was going to make sure the world knew exactly who she really was. He didn't care about the police investigation. He wanted to destroy her in the court of public opinion. Within 24 hours, Cohen did something that changed the narrative completely. He released the love letters. These were the letters Lana had written to Johnny, the very same letters Stompanato had used to blackmail her. They were intimate, desperate, and filled with a raw, submissive passion that shattered Lana's pristine image. The public, who thought they knew the Ice Maiden, was suddenly reading her pleas to a gangster, her declarations of undying, obsessive love. This was Cohen's revenge. He couldn't bring Johnny back, and he couldn't touch Lana physically without bringing down the heat of the entire LAPD, but he could assassinate her character, and he did. The newspapers devoured the letters. The narrative shifted from hero daughter saves mother to sex-crazed starlet's gangster affair ends in blood. Lana Turner wasn't just fighting a murder charge for her daughter anymore. She was fighting for her survival as an icon. But the real threat to the self-defense story wasn't Mickey Cohen. It was the corpse itself. The autopsy report began to raise questions that the defense team hadn't anticipated. The medical examiner noted the angle of the wound. The knife had entered straight in and slightly upward, penetrating with terrifying force. It had gone through skin, muscle, and vital organs, only stopping when it hit the spine. The amount of force required to drive a dull kitchen knife that deep through that much tissue was significant. Could a 14-year-old girl, allegedly shaking with terror, generate that kind of power? And why were there no defensive wounds on Johnny's hands? A man seeing a knife coming towards him instinctively puts his hands up. It is a primal reflex. But Johnny's hands were clean. This suggested he never saw it coming, or he was held down, or perhaps he was too stunned by who was holding the knife to react. The silence of the autopsy report screamed louder than any witness. As the investigation deepened, the missing evidence became the elephant in the room. Jerry Giesler, the lawyer who had arrived before the police, was famous for his ability to make problems disappear. Rumors began to swirl that Johnny hadn't just been threatening Lana with words that night. Had there been a tape recorder running? Had there been photographs scattered on the bed? If Johnny Stompanato had been holding evidence of Lana's darkest secrets when he died, where was it now? It certainly wasn't in the evidence bags of the LAPD. It had vanished into the ether of that 45-minute window. The police were left with a body, a knife, and a story that was too perfect to be true, yet just consistent enough to be impossible to disprove without the missing pieces. The stage was set for the inquest, but the script had a gaping hole in the middle of it. And then there was the knife itself, a simple kitchen tool that had ended a life. But in the hands of the forensic experts, it began to tell a different story. The fingerprints on the handle were smeared, inconclusive. But the pattern of the smear suggested it had been wiped or handled by multiple people. Was it possible that in the panic, the knife had been pulled out, cleaned, and then placed back? Or had it been transferred from one hand to another? The doubt was a small crack in the dam, but the pressure behind it was building. Lana Turner was about to give the performance of her life, not on a soundstage, but in a coroner's court, where the audience wasn't paying for tickets, but for blood. On April 11, 1958, the Los Angeles Hall of Records did not look like a government building. It looked like a movie premiere gone mad. Over 160 reporters, photographers, and newsreel cameramen fought for space, climbing over railings and hanging from balconies. They weren't there to see justice done. They were there to watch Lana Turner's greatest performance. And when the doors opened, she did not disappoint. She didn't enter as the glamorous sex symbol in diamonds and furs. She walked in wearing a modest gray wool suit, her hair simple, her makeup minimal. She was no longer the goddess. She was the grieving, terrified mother. The transformation was so complete, so visually perfect, that a hush fell over the chaotic room the moment she took her seat. For 62 minutes, Lana Turner held the courtroom in the palm of her gloved hand. This was the testimony that would decide whether her daughter would spend her youth in a prison cell or walk free. Lana's voice was soft, trembling just enough to break hearts, but clear enough to be recorded by every microphone. She painted a picture of a living hell inside the Bedford Drive mansion. She described Johnny not as a lover, but as a monster who had held her hostage in her own home. She recounted the threats that had haunted her sleep, the razor he promised would ruin her face, the threats to kill her mother, and the vow to destroy Cheryl. "I will cut you up," she quoted him, her eyes filling with tears that never quite ruined her mascara. "You will never work again." The climax of her testimony was the reenactment of the fatal moment. Lana stood up, using the court railing to demonstrate how Johnny had moved towards her, his face twisted in a rage she had never seen before. She described how Cheryl had opened the door, a small, fragile figure against the looming shadow of the gangster. "I didn't see the knife," Lana sobbed, her voice breaking. "I thought she had punched him in the stomach. I saw him grab his stomach and spin around." The courtroom was mesmerizingly silent. Men in the jury box were seen wiping their eyes. Even the hardened reporters who knew every trick in the book found themselves swaying with her narrative. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Or was it? That was the question that hung in the air like smoke. Was this the raw, unfiltered truth of a battered woman? Or was it a script polished to perfection during that mysterious 45-minute wait before the police arrived? The jury took only 20 minutes to reach a verdict. Justifiable homicide. The room erupted. Lana collapsed into her attorney's arms. Cheryl was made a ward of the court, but was effectively cleared of murder. It was the Hollywood ending everyone wanted. The beast was dead, the beauty was saved, and the child was a hero. But as the cheers faded and the flashbulbs cooled, the inconsistencies began to creep back in, whispering from the margins of the case file. The physical evidence simply didn't match the emotional testimony. The autopsy had shown the knife entered with terrifying force, straight in and up. Reenactments done by skeptics later suggested that for a girl of Cheryl's height to inflict that specific wound on a man of Stompanato's build, Johnny would have had to be leaning forward significantly, or Cheryl would have had to strike with the power of a grown man. Furthermore, there was the issue of the punch. Lana claimed she thought Cheryl had punched him. But to drive a blade that deep requires a different mechanics than a punch. It requires a thrust, a follow-through. How could Lana, standing inches away, mistake a lethal stabbing for a simple blow? And then there were the whispers from the staff. The maid who claimed she heard things that didn't align with the timeline. The rumors that Lana had been the one screaming in rage, not fear, just minutes before the silence fell. The verdict was in, legal history was written, but the court of public opinion was about to reopen the case. Because while the jury saw a mother saving her child, the forensic experts saw a wound that looked suspiciously like it was delivered by someone looking the victim straight in the eye, someone tall enough, strong enough, and desperate enough to end it all. The verdict of justifiable homicide cleared the legal docket, but it did nothing to scrub the bloodstains from the public imagination. In a twist of irony that only Hollywood could script, Lana Turner didn't retreat into shame. She stepped right back into the spotlight. Just months after her lover bled out on her bedroom floor, she began filming Imitation of Life. The movie was a melodrama about a famous actress with a troubled daughter. Art was not just imitating life, it was exploiting it. The film became the biggest box office hit of her entire career. The public flocked to the theaters, not just to see Lana act, but to look into her eyes and search for the truth of that night in Beverly Hills. Her salary from the film secured her financial future, paid for with the notoriety of a dead gangster. But for Cheryl Crane, the hero daughter, there was no Hollywood ending. While her mother basked in a career renaissance, Cheryl was sent to a juvenile detention center and later bounced between mental institutions and boarding schools. The bond between mother and daughter, which had supposedly been strong enough to warrant murder, fractured under the weight of the secret they shared. For decades, they remained distant, two women bound together by a tragedy that defined them both. Cheryl lived her life branded as the girl who killed Johnny Stompanato. She eventually wrote an autobiography, Detour, reasserting that she held the knife. But even in her own book, the descriptions of that night felt rehearsed, like lines memorized from a script written by a frantic lawyer in a blood-soaked room 40 years prior. The alternative theory never died. It whispered through the hills of Los Angeles for decades that Lana Turner, in a fit of passionate rage, was the one who plunged the knife into Johnny. That she, the adult, the star, the woman pushed to the brink, had snapped. And in the cold light of the aftermath, knowing a murder conviction would end her life and career, a decision was made. A minor would not face the gas chamber. A minor would be pitied. Did Lana Turner sacrifice her daughter's innocence to save her own stardom? Was her fainting spell in the courtroom the greatest performance of the 20th century? The forensic details, the downward angle of the blade, the immense force required, the lack of defensive wounds, always pointed more toward an adult assailant than a frightened child. When Lana Turner died in 1995, she took the absolute truth with her. There were no deathbed confessions, no hidden diaries revealed. She played her part until the very end, the consummate professional who never broke character. The pink bedroom is gone, the mansion has changed hands, but the ghost of April 4th, 1958, remains. It stands as a testament to the fact that in Hollywood, the most compelling stories aren't the ones projected on the screen, but the ones buried in the police archives, hidden behind 45 minutes of silence. If you enjoyed peeling back the layers of this glamorous tragedy and want to explore more dark secrets from the golden age of Hollywood, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We are just getting started uncovering the files they tried to burn. Until the next case, remember, not everything that glitters is gold. Sometimes it's just the reflection of a knife.